DeMeco Ryans said something in his press conference after the joint practice with the Panthers yesterday, that I think when people first heard it, I'm guessing a lot of them thought this was just classic coach speak, or they didn't quite believe DeMeco. DeMeco's gotten pretty proficient at the coach speak. He's gotten good at being not dishonest, but not disclosing the whole truth where you can't, and you got to be careful about it. But this one, I think he was genuinely telling the truth, and it's probably a surprise to some people. He was asked about intensifying the search for the final 53-man roster and where he is on that right now.
For me, I honestly am not thinking about the 53. Just thinking about guys getting better. And that process when it comes to for us to select 53 guys, after our third preseason game, we'll tackle that process when it gets there. But right now, what I love about our team, we got a ton of competitive dudes all across the board on our team. And I would love to keep all these guys around because, it just means a lot to me because knowing all the work, the sacrifice they put in, right, to make this team and to make themselves better, and I don't take that lightly. So that process will happen. It's always a tough process to dwindle it down to 53 guys when there's always more than 53 guys who are deserving of making the team.
Okay, so the thing that I think people probably didn't believe was that he's not thinking about the 53-man roster at all. I do believe that is 100% the mindset that he tries to take and the approach that he and Nick Caserio both try to take, and I'll explain why. The part that's 100% genuine is him wanting to keep more than 53. I think this Texans team, much more so than any time in the past 4 or 5 years, has guys that you feel like, okay, this guy's going to definitely get picked up somewhere else. Okay, we've got a log jam at this position, and wide receivers is one of them. Running backs is one of them, and the Joe Mixon gets and his uncertainty factors in, so we'll talk about that. But as far as him not focusing on the 53, Nick Caserio has recommended a few books that he likes that he's read over the. I ask him every year to give me some recommendations, and one of the authors that he always recommends is Morgan Housel. And there's a couple of books I read, Psychology of Money and Same as Ever, and I'll put links to those in the description below if you want to check those out. They are very, very much centered on not fixating on short-term events in lieu of the long-term plan. And in a training camp environment, the day-to-day is very much the short-term event. The long-term part of it is, hey, we're selecting players that either are developing through the course of training camp or we also believe, okay, there's hope for them in the future. And it's important because coaches are, like every other human being, subject to human bias. And sometimes a guy has a couple of good days in practice, and if you start thinking in terms of, okay, he's ahead in the race and that's our sixth wide receiver right there because he had a couple really good days, you start to have blind spots, and you might miss out on a couple things where, hey, John Mechie has a few good days, but then Xavier Hutchinson comes along. I think us as fans and the way that we're keeping score, it looks very much like Xavier Hutchinson is becoming more and more of a lock to make this team. John Mechie just competes his butt off, and he shows up. But Xavier Hutchinson, I think, is just a little bit more ingrained in the offense right now. Has a little bit more of the size, I think, that perhaps if they have to have a go at the tiebreaker, maybe they like that. As far as the running backs room, this is where it's getting interesting because now there was a fantasy expert that said he's got a couple of sources that says Joe Mixon's not going to be around at least at the very beginning of the season. I don't know if that guy's legitimate or not. Maybe he's very legitimate. I'm not big in the fantasy football world. I am starting to get nervous about the just lack of visibility of Joe Mixon and him not looking like he's, we only see what we see. And he could be maybe he's doing full workouts away from the scenes. Maybe this is all just some big display of gamesmanship by the Texans, but we just don't know with his injury and if and when he's going to be back. And the closer we get without any more positive news, I get nervous. And then you look at, I think there's a logjam at running back, but it's not at the top because you have concerns about Nick Chubb and just where he is health-wise and what his peak is going to be. Dameon Pierce didn't participate in the scrimmage the other day. Love Jawar Jordan. I love a lot of the things he's done in camp, but he's also almost definitely not going to be a 3-down starter for this team. I think he can do some really good things, but you can't lean on him going into a season. So right now it's Nick Chubb, Dameon Pierce isn't healthy, but he's slowly on his way back. You've got British Brooks. You got J.J. Taylor. If I had to choose between Jawar Jordan and J.J. Taylor, I think Jawar Jordan would probably make it. I think Dare Ogunbowale is going to make the team, but we love him for his versatility more so than anything else, not as a guy that you want to be your feature back if there's an injury. If Joe Mixon's out and Nick Chubb is either injured or needs a spell, you probably don't get into a season expecting him to go 25 reps. It's a log jam, and yet I don't feel great about the position. That's the one kind of anomaly on this team right now. Most of the other positions you feel like at wide receiver got all the starters and young draft picks that you can handle, but so you got to make some decisions that are tough on the back end. I think they'd like to keep John Mechie. I think they'd love to keep Braxton Berrios. If it was between those two, I think Braxton Berrios, because of his return ability, ends up making the team. So that leaves John Mechie, even though he's doing everything he can to put his best foot forward in camp, it kind of feels like he might be left on the outside, and maybe a trade becomes of it. Maybe they figure something else out. But those are the big position battles that are interesting right now. Here is DeMeco on those three receivers and Braxton Berrios, Xavier Hutchinson, and John Mechie, and how they've competed so far.
For the receivers, all three of those guys you mentioned, Berrios, Watson, Mechie, all just competitive at the catch point. Each guy showing up and made plays. Pick a day. One of those guys showing up, making plays, and it's really a lot of great competition there amongst all those guys.
Yeah, and it's tough. The other part of it, too, and I always try to remain cognizant of this, is that we don't see everything. We don't watch all 22 of all the practices, and with the wide receiver position especially, it's, you know how it is. This is why wide receivers can be so tempestuous sometimes in their personality. Sometimes the ball just doesn't come their way. They can do everything right, and for whatever reason, either in practice or in scrimmages or especially in preseason games, the ball just doesn't come your way. And whether you're going against the ones versus the twos is a huge factor in all of it. So I like everything I say about the way it feels right now, the coaches are analyzing film and taking a lot more into account. It's just hard to ignore Braxton Berrios and the way he moves and his athleticism, his speed, his ability as a returner. It just jumps off the field at you, or it jumps off the TV screen at you in a way that it doesn't necessarily with John Mechie. My early bold prediction this morning that I made was that John Mechie ends up with the New England Patriots, because the Patriots need to continue to bolster their wide receiving room. Mac Hollins is awesome. Walks barefoot, tough, gritty, all that stuff. That's your second wide receiver right now on the Patriots. And I think John Mechie has a relationship with Stephon Diggs, so they could quiz Stephon Diggs. There's still a lot of ties between the Patriots and the Texans. And Mechie feels like a Vrabel type of guy. So I'm thinking there's a chance that's where he ends up. On the value of joint practices, I feel like we talk about this a lot, and it's more of a philosophical thing, but a little bit of X's and O's here that I know some of you guys really like getting the football education. So at the end of this, I'll give you a little education about what DeMeco Ryans is talking about when he talks about the value of going against other teams in joint practices. There we go.
Yeah, for us, schematically, when you're in training camp, especially for us at week 3, right, we've going against offense, defense guys. They know the snap count. They know the plays they're going to see. They know the formations, and it kind of get monotonous after that third week. So to break it up, right, it helps us because Carolina, they do a lot more under defense, which our defense doesn't run much. So our offensive line get a chance to make calls and checks versus different schemes up front. They get to see different pressures, right? How are we going to pick this pressure up? And they aren't scouted looks. Like, we're not game planning the Panthers, so unscouted looks. Let's see if our rules and the things we teach from OTAs through training camp on a day-to-day basis, can you show up and can you execute just your fundamentals and techniques without having a game plan against someone? And that's the beauty of it, right? You don't know what's coming, you don't know what to expect, but can you just play within your rules, trust your technique, trust the guys around you?
So like, and a lot of that sounds like, okay, how much of a big deal could it really be? He talked about under front and over front. Ignore the 4-3 part of it, but this is where, a lot of times people say 3-4 defense versus 4-3 defense. It doesn't make as much difference as it used to, and that's true, but it still does make a difference. If we look at an under defense to my right, got a little bit of a mirror situation going here. under defense versus an over defense. The biggest difference is the defensive line. Well, it's the front 7 guys. So if you look at an under front, this is what a lot of 3-4 defenses will run maybe more frequently. You've got your Sam linebacker is up there on the line of scrimmage, and then one of your defensive ends is lined up over the tackle. Your nose tackle is aligned to the side of the tight end. And if you go over to a 4-3 front, you've got 3 linebackers who are completely off the ball. In an over front. In an over front, you've got your 3 linebackers off the ball. You've got a defensive end at the tight end. Sometimes he'll be inside, sometimes he'll be outside the tight end. But your 3 technique defensive tackle is on the tight end side, and your nose tackle is away. So you can see that's a different alignment. That's a different look. And when you spend your whole camp going over the one on your left there, the over defense, and all of a sudden you start facing a whole bunch of under defenses. I told Sean this morning, it's kind of like going from a QWERTY keyboard to an alphabetical keyboard. I know all 26 letters in the alphabet really, really well, but I'm really good on the QWERTY keyboard. Even though the alphabetical keyboard should be simpler and easier, and it is if you spend some time with it, but when I'm searching for something on Netflix, I'll be damned if I can find the Q or the Z or anything else like that. So there's an element of, making it automatic in the run game especially, or anticipating where your blitzers are coming from. The linebackers are aligned differently. It just changes everything enough. It's kind of like when we talk about offensive linemen going from the left side to the right side. It doesn't seem like it should be that big a deal, but it kind of is, because everything is grooved in and automatic. So when you're not game planning against a team especially, this is a challenge that offensive linemen and quarterbacks have to work through, which is a reason I'll tell you. That's why I was optimistic, more optimistic than maybe you should be, over a lackluster performance in the run game versus the Panthers yesterday. Just because the losses that I saw were more physical than mental. But I know that offensive line and CJ and the running backs have a mental challenge as they're facing under defenses that make it a little bit harder to play as physically and as aggressively. So I'm not making excuses. They got to get to the point, obviously, where they're going to see a whole lot of under defenses in an NFL season. They got to get good at it, but they're still doing it while learning a new offense. So the thing that's encouraging to me was that I didn't see all of the defensive linemen deep in the backfield on a run play. Everything for the most part was blocked up appropriately. And this sounds like we're going in baby steps, but yeah, that's where we are with this offense. So there is still room for progress, room for growth. And they're operating in a cleaner manner now than they were this time last year. Last year, it was just a disheveled mess in the run game. They couldn't sort things out for crap. They just flat out didn't know what they were doing on the offensive line. And I don't even blame the offensive lineman for it. I mean, I blame the entire the situation in its entirety, including the fact that you had an offensive line coach who in an article recently said, well, it might have been a factor that I'd never coached in a system quite like that before. Great. That's DeMeco's biggest error so far as a rookie head coach, was in that the turmoil and in the haste to hire a staff. It's really hard to get it right when assistant coaches are either under contract or taking jobs elsewhere. He made a couple of mistakes, and hopefully it's rectified now with Cole Popovich and Nick Caley. Let's see. Kasia, super interesting. Thanks for the explainer. Thanks. I could have found better graphics there that didn't have some of the names attached to it. Why does everybody want Mechie? So I'm guessing on the comments that people are saying Mechie. I don't know. I think that part of it is Mechie. When I say I don't know, Mechie has value, and Mechie's been really competitive this camp. And then I think there's a sentimental part of Mechie that he overcame cancer, came back, was obviously very affected by it for a couple of seasons. And last year was the first year he said that he felt like himself again in training camp. And I have no personal experience with trying to come back from cancer. Very few NFL players do. But I just know from injuries that I've had, there have been times where I felt like myself during training camp after coming back from a really bad injury or surgery. Oh, yeah, I feel great. I'm 100%. And then you get into the regular season, you're like, I'm not quite 100%. So there's the sentimental side of it, and then there is just simply the, hey, we liked this guy when we drafted him. He had a major setback that was going to be a multi-year scenario. And the question would be, what do they think his upside is? And right now, I think Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie are both guys where, their ceiling, I'd be surprised if they ever end up being Pro Bowl caliber wide receivers. Crazier things have happened, and maybe one or both of them does. But I think the ceiling isn't as high for either of them, and they look at both guys as guys that have been on the team for a while. Both have had a chance to form a relationship with C.J. Stroud and or Davis Mills, and it just feels like the edge goes to Hutchinson right now. And there's just the numbers aren't there to keep him around. So I'm gonna do Will Anderson later because Will had one of the most incredible displays of verbal prowess that I've ever seen from a football player. And I'll explain when we get to it a little bit later today.